I mean, as you've been talking, I've been reflecting on my own tradition, which is, in the Black Baptist Church, which has a lot of history to it, and our theology and our history are so interwoven with each other in a way. I was thinking about the imagery, and it's funny because the image that I got was that of the North Star, and the significance of it historically in terms of that movement toward liberation, and not exactly knowing where you were headed, but having something that was calling you to something better, something higher, but you still have to be the person to move. And in terms of my understanding of my ministry is there's that, I mean, not that I'm exactly Harriet Tubman, but in that sense of saying, there's something better out there, right? You have to move to get to it. You can't really do it alone that well. It's better if you travel together. There are rest stations along the way that will help you to get there. And nobody can tell you exactly where that place is. It's not like when you get to Philadelphia, everything's all better.
Is it?
Yeah. But when you get to Philadelphia. But just that sense, and the fact that sometimes it shines brighter than at other times. Sometimes you can't see it until you look off to the side of it a little bit, but it still is something that calls. And so I think of my ministry as being something that points toward the star, that reminds people of the star, that journeys with people. And I also think about the significance of, in our tradition, that the depth of prayer and music, and that singing out of the very core of your being, and how so many of those songs were also tied into that journeying process, in that they had the multiple levels, So you're singing about God, but you're also singing about freedom, So all of those things are really significant to me in terms of the way that I live out my ministry. And one of the things that has been particularly interesting is, as times have changed, as generations have changed, I mean, I think that some of that has been lost in the African American church, and there's been sort of like this shift toward more and more praise, and less being able to sit with whatever our broken places are, which is sadness. And also in the process of ministering and preaching across cultural and racial lines, sometimes it's hard speaking to people who don't have an immediate history of oppression. There's this quote attributed to Harriet Tubman where she says, I saved many and I could have saved a lot more, but I just couldn't get them to understand that they were slaves, or something like that. Sometimes when you're speaking to communities of people who are not, obviously oppressed by some external force, you have a hard time getting them to understand that they're enslaved in some way too. So I think it's interesting moving back and forth between the cultures, how those different manifestations happen.
Is that do you find a racial divide there, or is it, I mean, are you talking about, say, wealthier Black congregations you'd have a hard time?
Sometimes, I mean, it just depends, really. But I think sometimes it can be different. The less you are in touch with whatever your experience of oppression, be it as a community or as an individual, the less you're in touch with that, the harder it is for that sort of message to resonate for you. But I believe so strongly that there is liberation waiting down the road, and so the thing that gives me my sense of urgency is saying, come on, let's get free. Let's get free.
Just to go back to this theology of ministry, I wonder how we're sustained through the difficult times with the theology of ministry, because I was thinking about that, and I was also thinking that people sometimes they leave when they can't find what they need in a church, instead of sort of figuring it out together. And so I wonder, about a theology of ministry and how you can encompass those who can't really ever see anything better in this world. And I can't tell them that it will be better in this world either, because it doesn't seem to be getting better in this world. And how do we work with people for whom it's not going to be better by and by? Maybe the next generation will be better, but their lives won't be better. And I was thinking right now of a service we're doing next week on sex trafficking. And for many, it will never get better for them. They can't even get out of it. So I think about, you know, what is a theology of ministry that helps us to say some things are not going to get better. And what do you do about that? And I think about that with institutions. So I'm now coming back to a theology of ministry. I think as I live in the midst of institutions, family structures, this institution, church structures, you can more and more accept that it's mostly imperfect. And that a theology of ministry, you just see these moments where it's like Roger Haight said, and once in a while the world gets it right. And I feel like I can say, yes, I'm a Roman Catholic. Much of it I do not like. I'm a woman. I don't like it. And when my nieces say,
You're not saying you don't like being a woman. You're
no,
saying,
thank you. I
okay.
don't like being, I don't like being tied down because I'm a woman in the Roman Catholic Church. So I consider it a huge flaw in the church. That's what I say. It's a huge flaw. That doesn't mean I can't still charge ahead, but I think that it's not going to be all right for a very long time. And I feel that way in every institution which I belong to. And so I think a theology of ministry has to take into consideration that it's not resurrection all the time.
Or yet.
Or yet. Or
ever.
Or ever.
Maybe part of ministry is the ability to grieve. I mean, I really do find myself grieving for the church that I thought was the church. And I think in my lifetime, it just isn't going to be what I thought it was. But I don't want to, first of all, I'm not going to turn around and leave because I'm part of this tradition. And I want to use the voice I have, even, you know, so, but, you know, lots of times religious people are accused of being, you know, Pollyanna-ish and everything is just fine and, you know, God's grace will conquer all, and maybe that's why I brought up the dismal niche. You know, I sort of feel in a dismal niche about being a Catholic. But it's, again, it's not about me anyway, it's about something bigger. But I do think the ability to grieve, to sit with that, to, and the same thing is true of an institution. I mean, I arrived at Union in 1994, and within a few years, we're in this terrible financial situation, and, you know, you have these dreams for what this institution could be. And so I think it's important to dream, but, you know, sometimes, you know, just to keep going, you know, you know, guide our feet into the path of peace. I mean, just help me keep walking. Sometimes that's all I can say.
Well, and it's not to say that there aren't really moments, and I think that's
yes.
You know, we're in historical moments where you can always find something that is miraculously working. And so, in a way, I like this idea of Tom Driver around magic, and that there are moments, and the magic isn't that somebody is now who can't see can see, but the fact that everybody can have more courage or insight that is palpable for a moment. And I think that's exactly what happened with Egypt. You know, that for a moment, all of us, knowing how hard it's going to be tomorrow, for one moment, we all know that this is possible. So for me, if there's a theology of ministry, and until this conversation I didn't know so much about it, I feel like it has to be quite mixed. That it's not, I think, well, in a way it has to take in such a broader sweep. That it's always malleable, you know, that it's always going out like this, because the boundaries do move around. And also that it marks moments. That may be my liturgical sense, but I think that all our churches, really all our denominations, mark moments. and that it is it's not unimportant that no matter what, you're baptizing, no matter what, and that you mark these moments in a life.
Now, do you feel that that is the thing that, say, keeps you, in terms of your theology ministry, that keeps you from getting mired down in despair and cynicism to say that it never really gets better, that, I mean, that's one of the things that I think is a challenge for people, over time, is that notion. You're right, Liz, there's some people who are never going to get delivered. They're
going to be poor all their lives.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about. They're going to be poor all their lives.
So do you speak hope into that? How theologically, in terms of ministry, how do you not stay in that kind of place?
I heard a couple of things in there. One is that I heard that these people, they also get married, they have children.
Yes.
And people die, and people lose jobs, and people get jobs, and people celebrate, and they mourn, and a lot of our theology of ministry is exactly that. I think is recognizing that we work with people, and people live lives, and it is in marking those moments, and being with people, and really, the bottom line is being with people in those moments of life.
I mean, I think that's one of the things that I note about the Catholic Church, in terms of its Catholicity. I mean, the Roman Catholic Church seems to be everywhere in the world, and some of the things that we're reading now in our class about the cross, just witnessed from these Latin American women in particular. I mean, they too, many of them are poor, but they somehow are sustained by this powerful word, that they believe that Jesus is with them in the midst of this, poverty even, and they probably will always be poor too, Janet. I mean, I don't think
But what the Bible study taught them was that they were somebody.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they said, we're claiming our dignity.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what ministry is treating people, calling them to their dignity.
Yes.
And then just to say one other thing is, I think it's really important for us to have friends. That's how I keep mine, in the tough times. When I get cynical, I have to talk to my friends that are more hopeful.
If I could say anything to students who are working on a theology of ministry, I would say really find a community of people that can help sustain you. I mean, I think if we all could tell a story like that, I think, around this circle, but I think there's a group of students now who are thinking of having a covenant circle with one another, after they leave this school, and to have that kind of intentionality. I've been meeting with a group of clergy women since 1983, and we don't live anymore in the same city, but I mean, I think of your liturgy group. I mean, we could go around and each tell a story like that. I think that really is, you have to have those intentional places, and they really do need some planning, and some intentionality, so you don't just think they're going to happen.
And some time and energy.
And some time and energy, right.
And I think that these groups help us to do just what you're asking. That is, you can stay with a person in despair, and you just stay with that person. You don't expect the person to change.
No.
You might want them to change for themselves so that they don't live in it, but you wait. You wait with that person, and I think that's another thing that I hope our churches are broad enough to see. I feel like lots of our celebrations, they're too happy. They're too much on one side. They don't have enough emotion, variety of emotions, so that people who are despairing in one moment and the people who have just had a child in another can come together. And I think that's what these friendships, we stay with each other through thick and thin. But you kind of pass the baton on, you just don't have to smile. You just hand it on to somebody else for the moment. And I like that kind of theology of ministry, that there are places where you can be who you are, in that moment.